There is a dangerous, comforting myth that gaslighting only works on the weak, the naive, or the emotionally fragile. We like to believe that high intelligence, sharp logic, and a refined analytical mind serve as an impenetrable fortress against psychological manipulation. But modern behavioral psychology reveals a far more chilling reality. Highly intelligent, deeply rational people are often the most vulnerable targets for high-level gaslighting. In fact, the very qualities that make you smart, your ability to see multiple perspectives, your desire to solve complex, and your willingness to examine your own flaws are the exact levers a master manipulator uses to dismantle your sense of reality. Lambda. When an intelligent person encounters a lie or a distorted truth, their instinct is not to immediately accuse the other person of malice. Instead, their brain goes straight to problem-solving mode. They think, did I misremember the conversation? Did I miss a subtle detail? Am I missing the context here? An intelligent mind is hardwired to seek rational explanations for irrational behavior. Gaslighters exploit this intellectual empathy mercilessly. They plant a small seed of doubt, step back, and watch as your own high-powered mind does the destructive work for them, overthinking, analyzing, and rationalizing the lie until you convince yourself that you must be the one in the wrong. Dale Carnegie understood a fundamental law of human nature that applies directly to this psychological trap. The human ego will perform incredible mental gymnastics to maintain internal harmony and avoid confrontation with someone it trusts. Gaslighting does not begin with an explosive, obvious lie. It begins with micro-distortions, subtle rewritings of recent events, quiet denials of agreed-upon facts, and gentle shifts in emotional tone. The gaslighter says, I never said that, or you're misinterpreting things again, or you're being overly sensitive. Because you are an empathetic, reasonable person who values self-awareness, you give them the benefit of the doubt. You choose harmony over friction. This initial compromise is where the psychological anchor takes hold. Over time, these small concessions stack up, gradually shifting your baseline for what is normal. So, the gaslighter systematically erodes your trust in your own memory, intuition, and perception. They isolate your intellect, turning your capacity for self-criticism against you. You find yourself keeping meticulous notes, saving screenshots, and replaying past conversations in your head late at night, desperately searching for proof that you aren't losing your mind. But proof doesn't matter when you're playing a game where the rules are constantly being rewritten behind your back. Lancius. The tragedy of the intelligent victim is that they try to use logic to win an emotional war. They draft detailed, airtight arguments to prove to the manipulator that an event actually happened. They bring receipts, dates, and logic to the table, hoping that if they present the evidence clearly enough, the gaslighter will finally say, "You're right, I was mistaken." But a gaslighter is not interested in truth. They are interested in control. Every time you present a logical defense, you feed them more material to twist, debate, and redirect against you. Gender. To break free from this insidious cycle, you must first stop treating gaslighting as an intellectual misunderstanding that can be solved with better communication. You must recognize it for what it truly is: a calculated, high-stakes psychological power play designed to keep you off balance and dependent on their version of reality. True psychological liberation begins not when you convince the manipulator that you are right, but when you realize that you no longer need their permission to believe your own eyes and ears. And as we step into this masterclass on psychological defense, you will discover why traditional logic fails against emotional manipulation and how to deploy unshakable calm boundaries that instantly neutralize gaslighting before it can breach your mental fortress. An intelligent mind is hardwired to seek rational explanations, and gaslighters exploit this intellectual empathy mercilessly. To dismantle gaslighting instantly, you must first understand the primary engine that drives it: psychological projection combined with weaponized empathy. A gaslighter thrives on getting you to react emotionally to a false premise. The moment they throw out an absurd claim like, "You're remembering it wrong because you're always paranoid," their goal isn't actually to debate your memory. Their goal is to make you defensive. They want you to launch into an anxious, frantic explanation of why you aren't paranoid. Whether the second you engage in defending your character, you have subconsciously accepted their frame that your sanity and credibility are up for debate. Dale Carnegie taught that the highest form of social intelligence is knowing when to completely refuse an opponent's invitation to fight on their ground. When an aggressive speaker tries to drag you into a swamp of false logic and emotional manipulation, stepping into that swamp with them guarantees your defeat. A gaslighter relies entirely on your psychological friction to sustain their illusion. If you argue back, show distress, or present desperate proof, you validate their authority as the judge of truth. You are effectively asking them, "Please validate my reality." Then consider what happens when you completely flip this dynamic through the power of strategic detachment. Instead of offering proof or defending your memory, you meet their distortion with deadpan, unbothered certainty. When a manipulator says, "I never said that, you're making things up again," a compromised mind responds with, "Yes, you did. On Tuesday at 10 p.m., you said." But a mind anchored in unshakable self-trust responds with a calm, flat, two-word circuit breaker: "I know what I heard." Or simply, "We remember it differently." Look closely at the psychological mechanics of those statements. You're not trying to convince them of your truth. You're not begging them to agree with your memory. You're simply declaring your reality as an absolute, non-negotiable fact that requires zero external validation. When you say, "We remember it differently," and immediately move on or go silent, you shut down the debate entirely. You rob them of the argument they were desperately trying to trigger. Bad. This technique is known as grey rocking, fused with Carnegie frame control. Gaslighters feed on emotional drama, confusion, and psychological chaos. When you become as emotionally flat, uninteresting, and unyielding as a grey rock, their manipulation tactics hit a concrete wall. They try to provoke an emotional outburst to prove that you are unstable, but you give them nothing: no anger, no tears, no defensive justifications. You maintain a cool, steady, relaxed posture, looking at them with calm observation rather than frantic distress. Landia. When a manipulator realizes that their reality-warping statements no longer cause you to doubt yourself or scramble for approval, a sudden shift occurs. Their psychological leverage evaporates in seconds. A gaslighter cannot manipulate someone who does not care about winning their approval. They cannot distort the reality of someone who trusts their own senses completely and refuses to treat their own memory as an open court case. However, recognizing manipulation and using verbal circuit breakers is only the first step in protecting your mental sanctuary. To make yourself permanently immune to gaslighting across every area of your life, you must learn how to establish impenetrable psychological boundaries that prevent manipulators from ever gaining an anchor in your mind again. Declaring your reality as a non-negotiable fact robs a gaslighter of the argument they were desperately trying to trigger. The second foundational phase of building immunity against psychological manipulation is mastering the art of non-engagement through boundary setting. Highly intelligent people often fall into the trap of believing that setting a boundary requires a long, articulated speech. They write essay-length text messages, hold grueling 2-hour discussions, or present detailed manifestos explaining why they feel disrespected. But in the realm of high-level human behavior, over-explaining your boundaries is an immediate sign of weakness. It signals to a manipulator that your boundaries are up for negotiation, debate, and intellectual disassembly. Dale Carnegie emphasized that true conviction does not need a loudspeaker or 1,000 words to prove itself. Conviction is quiet, direct, and self-contained. When you establish a boundary with a gaslighter, your tone must be as cool and steady as steel. You do not ask for their understanding, nor do you demand that they see your point of view. You simply state the conditions of the interaction and enforce them through immediate decisive action. If they attempt to invalidate your reality or launch a personal attack, you do not argue back. You withdraw your presence. Then consider how this works in a real-world scenario. A toxic colleague or partner turns to you during a discussion and says, "You are completely unstable. Nobody else agrees with your crazy ideas." Instead of getting flustered or listing the people who do agree with you, you look them directly in the eyes, keep your voice at a low, measured pitch, and say, "I am happy to discuss this project with you rationally, but I will not engage if you insult my judgment. Let's revisit this when we can stick to the facts." Tom Diaz. If they immediately attempt to double down, mock you, or accuse you of being thin-skinned, you do not offer a second warning. You do not step back into the arena to defend your honor. You simply close your notebook, stand up, or end the call with absolute calm and composure. You leave them standing alone in the room with their own toxicity. You demonstrate through action the ultimate language of authority, that access to your mind, your time, and your energy is a privilege that gets revoked the moment respect is breached. This immediate execution of consequence breaks the psychological script that the gaslighter relies on. Manipulators operate like amateur gamblers. They expect you to stay at the table and keep betting your emotional energy in hopes of winning back your lost dignity. When you walk away from the table entirely, you declare the game over. You show them that their attempts to rewrite reality have zero power over your physical actions or your internal peace. Menda. Furthermore, this practice protects you from the subtle trap of retroactively doubting yourself. The gaslighter's favorite weapon is the delayed doubt, the quiet seed planted during the conversation that grows in your mind hours later when you are alone. By refusing to debate your memory or tolerate disrespect in the moment, you prevent that seed from ever taking root in your subconscious. You preserve your mental energy for your own goals, projects, and relationships built on authentic mutual respect. When you consistently enforce boundaries with zero drama and absolute finality, manipulators quickly realize that you are an unsuitable target. You are too grounded, too self-assured, and entirely immune to their emotional traps. But to complete this transformation and ensure that no manipulator can ever disrupt your life again, you must learn how to rebuild total, unshakable trust in your own internal compass. Over-explaining your boundary signals to a manipulator that your peace is open for negotiation. Once you have established cold, unyielding boundaries, the vital next phase is rebuilding complete, unshakable trust in your own internal compass. The most damaging consequence of prolonged gaslighting isn't just the stress of the argument itself. It is the insidious lingering habit of self-doubt. Even after a manipulator is gone or silenced, their voice can remain in your head, whispering that you are overreacting, misremembering, or being unreasonably difficult. To purge this mental poison permanently, you must cultivate what psychological researchers call radical self-validation. Dale Carnegie understood that human confidence is not built by seeking approval from others. It is built by honoring your own internal commitments and respecting your own perception. A manipulator's entire strategy relies on getting you to outsource your truth to them. They want you to ask, is this okay? Or am I being crazy? Radical self-validation means taking that power back entirely. It means looking at a situation, acknowledging your emotional reality, and deciding that your experience is valid simply because you experienced it, without needing a second opinion, a consensus, or an admission of guilt from the person who hurt you. And to operationalize this in your daily life, you must stop seeking closure from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. A high IQ trap that traps millions of intelligent individuals is the desperate search for the manipulator to finally admit what they did. You think, if I can just explain it one more way, if I can just show them how much damage they caused, they will finally apologize and validate my reality. But seeking closure from a gaslighter is like asking the person who set your house on fire to help you rebuild the walls. They will never grant you the truth, because withholding the truth is the very source of their power over you. Instead, you create your own closure. You close the book by deciding that their confession is irrelevant to your reality. When you catch yourself replaying a past conflict in your head, searching for ways you could have proven your point better, perform an immediate mental pivot. Shift your focus away from, how do I make them understand? And redirect it toward, what do I need to do right now to protect my peace? This simple question shifts your mind from a passive, defensive state back into an active, high-agency posture. Furthermore, you must audit your inner circle to ensure you are surrounded by psychological safety. Gaslighters thrive in environments where confusion and subtle disrespect are normalized. Counteract this toxicity by deliberately cultivating relationships with people who operate on radical transparency, mutual respect, and psychological clarity. People who validate your feelings even when you disagree, and who never use your vulnerabilities as weapons. Dale Carnegie's foundational principle of sincere, honest appreciation isn't just a tool for making friends, it is the ultimate standard for filtering out manipulators. When you refuse to outsource your self-worth to external critics, you build an invisible armor around your mind. You move through the world with a calm, formidable presence of someone who cannot be tricked, coerced, or gaslit, because your anchor is planted firmly within your own character. You no longer fear psychological games because you have mastered the ultimate secret to winning them, refusing to play entirely. In our final movement, we will synthesize these powerful psychological frameworks into a lifelong mental operating system, ensuring that you remain permanently untouchable, unbothered, and in complete command of your reality. Seeking closure from a gaslighter is like asking the person who set the fire to help you rebuild the walls. The ultimate evolution of psychological freedom is transforming your mind into a fortress where emotional manipulation cannot even find an entry point. When you achieve true clarity of character, gaslighting ceases to be a terrifying threat you must constantly guard against. It becomes a bizarre, transparent behavior that you observe with detached, almost clinical amusement. You reach a level of internal certainty where no external voice, no matter how loud, aggressive, or deceptive, can alter the fundamental truth of who you are and what you know to be real. Dale Carnegie spent his entire life demonstrating that the highest form of human influence is not about controlling others, but about mastering yourself so completely that you inspire respect through your sheer stability. A master manipulator thrives in environments filled with insecurity, unspoken tension, and desperate needs for approval. But when they collide with someone who is comfortable in their own skin, who operates with unyielding integrity, and who does not fear standing alone in their truth, their manipulation tactics crumble instantly. You become completely unmanipulatable. And consider the immense quiet power you project when you walk into any room, whether a high-stakes corporate meeting, a complex family dynamic, or a tense social setting, knowing that your peace is entirely under your own sovereign control. If someone attempts to twist your words, you don't panic. If someone tries to project their own guilt onto you, you don't absorb it. You look at them with steady eyes, a relaxed brow, and an unbothered smile, recognizing that their games carry zero authority over your mind. You have reclaimed your attention, your energy, and your life. Ben. Remember that intelligence is only a vulnerability when it is divorced from self-trust. When you unite a sharp, analytical mind with an unshakable trust in your own perception, you create the ultimate psychological shield. You stop wasting your precious intellectual horsepower on refighting toxic arguments, analyzing malicious behavior, or begging for validation from those who are committed to tearing you down. Instead, you redirect that brilliant mind toward your highest purpose, your deepest relationships, and your greatest creative ambitions. And as you move forward, carry this fundamental truth with you. Your reality is not open for debate. Your memory, your boundaries, and your self-worth do not require a court of law, a unanimous vote, or the permission of a manipulator to be valid. You are the sole author of your life experience. By mastering the art of cold non-engagement, setting steel-clad boundaries, and anchoring your soul in radical self-trust, you step out of the shadows of doubt and into the clear, blinding light of permanent emotional mastery. Your reality is not open for debate. True power begins the moment you stop asking for permission to believe your own eyes.